got it. When you do the notes, the minutes, I'll have everybody on there.
Do you have the
We're all set to go.
Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first City of Providence COVID-19 Recovery and Resiliency Task Force. My name is Angie Bannerman Ancoma. I serve as the Vice President of Equity Leadership at the Rhode Island Foundation, but I'm also a lifelong Providence resident, and have been living in Providence for over 40 years. And so I'm incredibly honored to be able to serve in this capacity in partnership with my co-chair, Oscar, which I'll let him introduce himself.
Angie, can you please do a roll call, please, before we do introductions?
Sure. So can I do a roll call to see who's present?
Thank you.
Co-chair Oscar Co-chair Angela Bannerman.
Present.
Present.
Oscar.
Present.
We can't really hear whoever's speaking.
Councilwoman LaFortune. Councilwoman LaFortune.
Present. Present.
Councilor Kerwin is absent. Diana Perdomo.
Present.
Kristen Adamo.
Present.
Peter Asen.
Here.
Shannon Carroll is absent. Sabrina.
She's here. She's here.
Shannon Carroll is present. I just was muted, so I'm here.
Okay. Sabrina Shahari.
Present.
Chanabe Che is absent. Julian Drix.
Here.
Jim Karam is absent. Giselle.
Jim Karam is actually on the line. Maybe he didn't unmute himself.
Who? Jim is present.
Jim, where's Jim? She said he's online.
I see him.
Okay. Giselle
right there. He's muted.
Shank.
Oh, wait, Jim is here. So Jim is here. So that's 10. That'll be 10. And then.
Okay.
Giselle Shank.
Am I on mic?
If they talk, let's see if they can.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had a little technical problem. It's called being over 60 years old.
Larry Warner.
Present.
Okay. You have 11 present and 3 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you, Angie, for starting the meeting. My name is Oscar Mejias. I am the founder and president of the Rhode Island Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, business owner, being in this state for more than 15 years. I've been participating in several economic development committees and organizations. I've been working with the City of Providence for the last 6 or 7 years in different projects. So for me, it's an honor be co-chair with Angela Ancoma this group. I can see great professionals. I'm really excited about what we could reach through this team.
Thank you, Oscar. If we can go around and do a quick introduction of all the steering committee members, that would be very helpful. We want to make it brief because, as Oscar said, we have a tight agenda today. So perhaps we can start with who I see to my left, Sabrina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sabrina Chaudhry, and I am the co-founder of Stay Silent PVD. We're an events and marketing agency based here in Providence, Rhode Island. And our main goal is to provide spaces for joy, dance, and community for young people of color. And we were founded in 2012. Most recently, we just opened our first live music venue and nightclub called Crib on North Main Street in Providence. And excited to be here with all of y'all. Do you want me to popcorn it, Angie?
Yes, if you would know who all the committee members are, feel free.
Oh, I don't, so sorry.
How about Julian?
Good day, everyone. My name is Julian Drix, resident of Providence, and here representing some environmental justice and climate change work. I work at the Rhode Island Department of Health and have been engaged in COVID response for the past year and a half, but I'm not here as an official representative of the Department of Health, just bringing that perspective and experience with me. Great to be here with some familiar faces and to meet everyone else who's new. Thank you.
Peter Asen?
Hi, I'm Peter Asen. I'm the Director of Strategy and Development for the Providence Housing Authority.
Shannon? Carol?
Did you call on me, Angie?
Yes, I did.
Hi. So sorry, I'm joining from vacation, so my connection isn't great. So I'm Shannon Carroll. I am the Executive Director of Genesis Center. We do adult education, workforce development, support services, and we have an early learning center. Happy to be here.
Kristen Adamo?
Hi, I'm Kristen Adamo. I'm the President and CEO of the Providence Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau. We run the Rhode Island Sports Commission. We book meetings and conventions into the destination, and we are the leisure marketing arm for the city of Providence.
Kristen. Councilwoman LaFortune?
Hello, everyone. My name is please excuse my voice, allergies. My name is Councilwoman Nearville LaFortune, representing Ward 3 and the person who in the resolution to create this task force so that we can be strategic about these funds that will be allocated or invested in our community. So it's wonderful to see such a diverse group representing various sectors within our community to be a part of this discussion, and hopefully we will be able to gauge with the community, get community input, and work with some of our community stakeholders to make the right decision for our city. So thank you all for being part of this wonderful committee, and thank you to the mayor and the chairs for prioritizing this.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Jim?
Yes, hi, Jim Karam. I'm the president of First Bristol Corporation. We're a Southern New England real estate development company, and our hotel division has 8 hotels in the Southern New England area, 5 in Rhode Island, 3 in the Newport area, and 2 in Providence, including the Homewood Suites, which is the newest hotel in Providence, and also the Hampton Inn and Suites on Weybosset Street.
Thank you, Jim. And I'm last but certainly not least is Larry Warner.
I'm Larry Warner. I'm the Chief Impact and Equity Officer with United Way of Rhode Island, and I oversee our grant making, policy and equity work, research and data analytics, 211 call center, senior and disability services, and we are the home of the Rhode Island After School Network. Good to see you all.
Good to see you. I hope I didn't miss anyone. If I do, raise your hand, please.
The mayor.
Great. I'm sorry, the mayor. Mayor Lorza?
Yes.
Would you like to say a few words?
Sure, I'll be very brief. I want to thank everybody, first of all, for accepting the invitation to be part of this group. In particular, I want to thank Councilwoman LaFortune and all my colleagues on the City Council for helping to create this group. This really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we have to invest in our city. So I'm so excited about the diverse group of people and perspectives we have around the table right now. And I'm really eager to get the conversation started and start seeing how we can best invest these dollars into our community. So thank you again, everybody, and I really look forward to this work.
Thank you, Mayor Lorza. Oscar?
Yes. Well, again, we are really excited to co-chair this group. We know that all of you has been working in different areas, so we know that we have a great team to work in this task force. Thank you, the mayor. Thank you, the city authorities to give us this opportunity. As the mayor already said, it's a one lifetime opportunity. So I think that is really, really important that we do a very good communication and we can reach the goal that we will set in this team. Once we did the presentation, Angela and Coma and me will be the co-chairs, and we will be working together, hand by hand with all of you to reach all our goals. All of you received the documentation, so we will be really, really fast over the purpose, guiding principles, and structure. Let me start, Angie, with the purpose. Basically, we want to create recommendations and to present those recommendations as a best way to create a recovery plan, okay? After this hard time, the pandemic, so we will have the opportunity to create buckets and assign funding in different areas that will be really, really needed by our community. The other thing is we should be maybe one step forward, creating a critical thinking about solution that has a real effective impact, not just in long term, not just during the 2 years that the American Recovery Act was approved for, but at least in long term and try to find permanent solutions of the problems that we have in our city of Providence. So the purpose of this group will be create recommendation that hopefully could be implemented, and we could be following the implementation of those solutions or over the needs that our city has. So let me pass to Angie to talk about the principles of this group.
Thank you, Oscar. Well, it's not lost on us that we are in the current circumstance that we are right now as a result of a global public health crisis. And so, you know, one of our initial principles is to ensure that our work is advised by public health leaders and experts. We also want to be responsive to the needs that directly impact the people in Providence. We know a number of people within our city were directly impacted. And so we want to ensure that our process is also informed by those impacted as well too. And also be responsive to the needs of the small business community directly impacted. And we all know, have heard, and have seen how our work needs to be informed by a racial equity perspective and framework due to the widening disparities that were laid up to bear as a result of COVID. And so our work is really focused on making action-oriented, ensure that there is work that is done as a result of this, and we also place our city in a path toward economic recovery and opportunity for all Providence residents. And so we do understand that a sense of urgency. You know, our residents in our community cannot afford to wait any longer. And so we ensure that we're going to be working with residents and stakeholders, and also make sure that we're inclusive of the diverse voices in our community by a public engagement process, and also ensure that we are not only responsive, but also efficient to our equitable city governance, and really ensure that our work is driven by the recommendations for the community as well too. Next slide, Oscar, if you want to.
Yes, which is about the structure of this group. By the way, I want to comment that I really happy to see the diversity of this group, which from the beginning is saying that we will have the opportunity to do a recommendation really, really focused in equity, in diversity, and inclusion as the main elements of this task force. So I'm really happy about that. So the structure, there is a very important point. The function should be advisory only. We are not expected to present report by the task force per se. However, we will be working with some consultant. They produce report. We will be establishing the communication with the community and with other stakeholders about the work that we are doing. So the main function of this task is provide advice and recommendation. Okay, we will be addressing issues in so important things like housing insecurity and violence. And of course, the recommendation should be include some activities and some initiative that should be started as soon as possible, being insecurity, violence, a very, very hot topics in our city. In other side, we will support, our recommendation will be supporting short, medium, and long-term strategies regarding infrastructure and small business. As everybody knows, our economy has been highly hit by the pandemic. So we need to be concentrated in community needs and racial equity, as we mentioned before. We need to take this lifetime opportunity, okay, and start as soon as possible the continued recovery and sustainability of our economy. And of course, trying to help in the biggest way our small business community in the state, and just not to recover, but entrepreneurs and future developments. And again, looking at have a sustainable investment in our city. We need to think in short, medium, and long term, because it's an opportunity that we cannot leave in the side. So with this, part of the agenda is to hear some suggestion from you. We will ask, please, very short suggestion. And at the end, we want to approve this purpose guiding principle and structure as a framework. We don't want to be tied to a document that is too general. So that will be a framework that the task force will be using to develop the recommendation that we have been talking. So I would like to give the opportunity, if you have some suggestion, please let us know, raising your hand. Okay, I don't see any hand. So I think that we should then propose a motion to approve this document as a framework for this task force. So, oh well, I see the hand of Kristen.
Yeah, Oscar, I just have one question. I mean, this all looks good and I'm pleased to see the small businesses. That's my bread and butter. But has there been any thought given to economic development and including sort of those bigger projects involved as well?
Well, I think that the answer is that every topic that we will analyze will cover economic development in general. When we mention small businesses, because they have been more affected by the pandemic, but definitely all the solutions that we can propose should cover economic development in general, bigger company, medium company, and small business too. I saw another hand.
If I could just add to that too, later on in the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the topics that we're going to be covering over the next course of month. And so economic development is one of those, Kristen.
Well, because we are running with the time, if someone wants to propose the motion.
Oscar, I'm just noting that Peter Eason has his hand up. He's up for a little bit.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Peter. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the focus in terms of the immediate and urgent need around the housing and violence. But the one thing I just wanted to say around this, I don't think it needs to change the principles or structure necessarily, but I think that there, in both cases, certainly I could speak more on that to the housing piece, that there may be some need to invest in longer term solutions rather than solely look at that. Even though there's an urgency to the issue, a lot of the needs and challenges may be things that can't be addressed immediately, particularly, you know, just the limited availability of actual housing units in the city itself is something that maybe there's ways to do it more quickly or less quickly, but I just wanted to state that it's not necessarily a thing where we only want to make investments that would be short-term and immediate, but that we should be looking at ways to address those issues long-term as well.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yes, as I mentioned, all the team need to think about short, medium, and long-term solution. Again, this is a lifetime opportunity that we will have to address those issues and not just an immediate and short solution. We need to think in long term. So definitely that is part of the framework that we are talking here. Anyone else? Okay, so if someone please want to present the motion to approve this document as a framework for the task force.
May I have a motion, please? Shannon? May I have a second? Shannon made the motion. May I have a second, please?
Larry Warner seconds.
Larry Warner, thank you. Okay, are you on item number 3?
Yes, and luckily the work that we're doing, we're not going to be doing it alone. We have a whole project management team that's going to be working with us. And so I'll open the floor for Michael to talk a little bit about the work and how they're going to be supporting us as a task force. Michael?
Angie, can I just ask you a question? Can you, when you go on to the next item, can you just say item number 3, like just not roll into each one? If you could do that, that would be great.
Sure. So item number 3 is introduction of the project management team. And one of the first people who's going to be speaking is Michael. Oh, he moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Angie.
No problem.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Beauregard. I'm the managing principal with Systems Change Strategies. We've been engaged by the city to support the work of the task force and the ARPA deployment more generally. What we will be providing is project management and community engagement support for the task force and these initiatives. We also have, in addition to our growing staff, we also have some community partners as well as budget and translation partners to support the work. Our community partners include Arise, DARE, the NAACP of Providence, Facilitate Change, and the Latino Policy Institute, with additional supporting for interpreting and translation from Be More Interpreting and Translation. And additionally, we have a 3-person budget and research team. So we look forward to working with you collaboratively to support the work of the task force and really ensure that your needs and ideas that are being brought forward by this are being supported, and additional technical support and whatever we can do to support that work is done. Additionally, in collaboration with our community partners, we want to make sure that we have a really strong and authentic community engagement strategy around the topics that the task force and more broadly the ARPA funds are going to be addressing. I look forward to presenting that in more detail at our next meeting for feedback and input from the task force. We're still, waiting to really identify our order of topics. So once we have that, we look forward to putting forward proposal for our approach to community engagement. And finally, I'll just share that we will also be supporting on deployment of programs as needed with the city and task force collaboration. And we'll be doing that in partnership with iParametrics, who have been supporting this city with additional compliance and regulatory things. So I'll pass it over to Jeff Stevens from iParametrics so he can introduce himself and his company.
Hi, and I'm Jeff Stevens from iParametrics. I'm Vice President of Emergency Management here, and we'll be supporting the task force and the city throughout the deployment of programs with compliance, monitoring, grant management solutions to really make sure that you achieve your goals. I think the mayor said it well, and Oscar, you said it well as well. It's how do we invest in the community short, medium, long term to make that transformative change and put Providence back on the trajectory, to really be a leader within the nation about how these dollars are spent. So we'll be providing various compliance services. We're going to be doing some monitoring of federal changes and Treasury regulations, along with my colleagues, Emily Noyes and Tanya Burks. And we also have some supporting sub-consultants that have worked throughout the country. And we work very collaboratively on these dollars. So we really thank you for the trust and opportunity that you've placed in us. and look forward to working with the city over the next few years.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have any comment on that, or we can move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is Diana Perdomo. She's going to talk a little bit about the Orientation and American Recovery Act overview presentation. Diana?
Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Perdomo. I am the Chief of Policy for the City of Providence, and I've been working very closely with the co-chairs, the administration, the council, and our 2 consultant groups to help facilitate and move forward this process in order for us to allocate the American Rescue Plan dollars in a very efficient, effective way, and ensuring we can make some big changes for Providence. I'm very excited to be here and very happy to be here as part of this first meeting among this group. I'm going to do a brief presentation on the American Rescue Plan, a really high-level overview of what the intention is for these funds, how they're coming to the state, and what we would expect in Providence. So just to confirm, everyone can see the screen, correct?
Yes.
All right, great. Okay. So the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, also called the COVID-19 Stimulus Package or American Rescue Plan, is a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill passed in March and pushed by President Joe Biden. The purpose of it is really to speed up the United States recovery from the economic and health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing recession. The funds are coming in a few different ways. It is a CRF-style state and local fund, CRF meaning COVID relief funds. We are estimating at more than $1 billion for the state, plus another $100 million for COVID capital projects, estimated about $400 to $540 million for cities and towns. And all of these funds are administered by the US Treasury. We'll expect to see and have already seen some direct awards, multiple specific awards to state agencies for dedicated purposes, for example, education, rental assistance, and estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars in those direct funds. Those are going to be administered by various federal agencies. We've also seen a little bit already regarding ongoing stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment and tax credits, and more for individuals and families as part of the assistance to individuals and businesses, seeing extension of PPP loans, restaurant relief, and more for businesses. What does this mean specifically for Rhode Island? So the COVID local fiscal recovery fund will total about $130.2 billion, and we're estimating about $540 million going directly to the state of Rhode Island. These will be flexible funds for COVID-19 relief and revenue replacement available for use for costs incurred through December 31st, 2024. There's also a CDBG entitlement, communities receiving $45.6 billion. Communities include Cranston, East Providence, Pawtucket, Providence, Warwick, and Socket, and the Treasury pays these funds directly to the communities. CDBG non-entitlement communities will receive $19.5 billion. And those are allocated funds on a per capita basis, and the amount cannot exceed 75% of the most recent municipal budget. There's also an additional county allocation totaling $65.1 billion. Those monies will be allocated to counties on a per capita basis as well, and the Treasury will distribute county money to state, then gets distributed to each county within the county on a per capita basis. The total will be about $205 million for Rhode Island, and $123.9 million to Providence County. You may have seen already some action being taken by the Rhode Island Department of Education and the Providence School District regarding a direct allocation for funds to education. The flexible education funds with 90% distributed to local education agencies and 10% reserved for state educational agency RIDE. The Elementary and Secondary School Relief Fund, I mean, many people may have heard the acronym ESSER. They've come in multiple tranches, ESSER funding, and the latest fund is really focusing on these areas, these key program elements. So the LEAs must use 20% of the fund received to address learning loss, and RIDE must also use its estimated $43.7 million set aside to address learning loss, after-school programming, summer enrichment, no more than 5% for administration loss, and the remainder for emergency needs in response to COVID. There are a couple of rules associated with that, and if folks are interested in getting into the details, I recommend going to the Treasury site to learn more about the education funds. Now, Providence Allocation specifically. There are two large tranches of funding coming to Providence specifically. One is approximately $165.8 million in federal funding to the city. In part, that will be a direct federal allocation of $131 million. The city has received its first half of the 131 to date, and we will expect to receive the second half later down the line. In addition, we'll be receiving county level allocation via the state. There was considerable outreach with Treasury through various cities to ensure that any county level allocation that didn't have a county level government was able to come down to the cities that are part of that county. So Providence will be receiving specifically about $34.8 million, but we will be receiving that via the state. There's also another approximately $180 million in federal funding that's going directly to the Providence Public School District. The breakdown of that is 20% learning loss, about $31.3 million there. Remaining LEAs should receive $125.4 million, and the Consolidated Appropriation Act of $23.3 million. That funding in particular is actually separate from this task force. You may have seen a notice go out from the Providence Public School District regarding a separate engagement process, but it's important for us to know that these funds are also available as we go down our path of determining usage and providing guidance on usage. On that realm for the state local funds, these are the specific eligible uses. In the future, we hope to do a deeper dive into the eligibility so that the task force members are clear on what does qualify for American Rescue Plan funds. But broad overview, the funds are intended to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Its intended use is for providing premium pay to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency. There's a provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the COVID-19 public health emergency, and to make necessary investments in water, sewer, broadband, and infrastructure. Two caveats on the funding. It is not allowable to use funds for tax cuts or pension fund contributions. And municipalities can transfer funds to quasi-agencies, nonprofits, or back to the state. For more information, I recommend everyone check out the U.S. Department of Treasury's Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. There's a lot of great resources on that site, including the published interim final rule that goes over how these funds can be spent. There's also an FAQ on the site, and they are still continuing to receive questions from municipalities around the use of these funds, and we'll continue updating the FAQ as those questions are clarified. Before ending my presentation, I also wanted to give a very quick overview. I had submitted an exhibit to the clerk. The city has recently just passed, and I will share my screen again in a second. Through our budget process, the council and the administration had passed the first tranche of funding using the American Rescue Plan. And the first tranche of funding, for orientation for everyone, I'll do a quick overview. There was $42.5 million allocated to various projects and initiatives. One large portion of the fund to take note of is the revenue recovery piece, which is a eligible use, of course, through the coronavirus eligibility requirements. And we would expect that the city will probably have to continue looking at some revenue recovery requirements for fiscal year 23 and 24. Now, this is specifically for 22. Beyond that, we're doing investments in summer programming, youth investments, anti-violence and non-violence investments, funding to the Providence Redevelopment Agency for the Roger Williams Park Gateway project, grants to libraries, some grants to nonprofits for homeless intervention, diversion area support services, and to continue water fire this year. We've also allocated about some money for street sweeping and sewer repair. And there's also a fund relative to small business relief and administration of expenses. I expect that this is likely the first and only ordinance that is going forward outside of this committee process. Beyond that, I think the city will continue to talk about revenue recovery, but the remaining funds, about $80+ million, are the purview for this committee.
Diana?
Yes?
This is the amendment, correct? The one you put up on the screen?
I believe so. I checked with Tina. She said it was the last draft.
Okay, so she said that this has to be amended in committee because this is the amended one?
Oh, okay.
Is this the original? Is this the one that got passed, or there's another amendment? Because if this was the amended one, it was the one that the water fire got added to.
So this is the amended version. I don't know. Yes, it is the amended version. It has water fire included.
Okay. Yep. So just if you want to just make a motion on to substitute the old for the new one, the old ordinance for the new ordinance.
Is this procedural? You'd like me to make a motion to substitute the old ordinance for the new ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm motioning to do that.
Can I have a motion to substitute, please?
Second.
Oscar, okay, Oscar, yep. I need a second.
I'll second.
Who was that? I'm sorry. Is that Kristen?
Kristen.
Kristen, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Now can you approve as amended, please?
You're asking that I put forward a motion to please approve as amended this document?
Yes. Diane, okay. Can I have a second?
A second.
Sabrina. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. Substitution is complete. You can go on to the next item.
Okay, I don't know. We would like to open the mic of if someone want to say something regarding the presentation of Diana. Any comment, please?
This is Larry. I have clarifying questions. I just wanted to first confirm you said that there's about $80 million that's under the purview of this committee, and the dollar amount already allocated by the city council was that 42 million?
That is $42.5 million. I do believe that relative to our projections around revenue recovery, that would be an additional $30 million, and that the predominant balance of that would be the purview of this committee. So that's over $80 million.
30 million is in addition to the 80 million, correct? Or?
No, so we have $165 million. The council and administration approved $42.5 million. Under the American Rescue Plan, there's a purview specific to revenue recovery that the city will use for any revenues lost during the pandemic. And we're projecting out for a couple more years. That includes FY23 and FY24, and we are estimating that to be about 30 million. So we're reserving that fund out. The remaining balance would be purview of this committee. So that's over $80 million.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And I guess just to understand kind of where our work is picking up or starting off, what, if any, community engagement was there in the allocation of the 42.5 for the city's budget?
So these went through a public hearing through our finance committee. There was a discussion there, and it was approved as part of the budget, which is a public process.
questions?
I have a question, well, a comment. So, Larry, thank you for your question. In fact, I actually did not vote in support of the budget because there wasn't a public process for that. It went through the finance committee, and it was voted by the majority of council, and there were certain council members who did not vote on that because there wasn't a true public process to determine how those fundings should be spent. But it still leaves us with about 80 million. Now, Diana, can you give a little bit more information about the reserve $30 million? Because I think this is a bit new to all of us, how that's going to be allocated. Because from my perspective and from various members of council and the public, the dollar amount that was allocated was the little over 42 million.
Yeah, I actually think that would be a really great question for a finance director to come in and present to you all to discuss the revenue recovery and how it falls in line with the American Rescue Plan. As I said, that 30 million is just an estimate at this point. That net amount might change, but I do think it would be worthwhile for a future meeting for us to have a more detailed discussion on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's great in terms of having a discussion about why the funding, why it was important to allocate towards that. I think just to Larry's point, we still were missing that public process. And if you can right now just give a little bit more detail about the 30 million that's reserved, that would be helpful.
I honestly think that is a little bit beyond my personal expertise, and I think that the finance director would be much better suited at a future meeting to talk about that.
I'm happy to jump in on that. I think it's so a big part of these American Rescue Plan dollars are to help mitigate revenue loss in the budget, and so that's just quite frankly we're expecting fewer revenues in fiscal year 22, the one that we just began. As a result of the recession that came from COVID, and we're anticipating that it's going to take a couple of years to get back to normal. So it's our best estimate of the revenue loss that we're going to have to draw down from the American Rescue Plan dollars to fill that gap. And as Diana mentioned, we can bring in the finance team to help. Give some of the detail on how we arrived at that estimate of $30 million, but that's what it's for.
Yeah. Mayor, if you don't mind, because there was, in addition to the recovery funds, there were some additional funding that was spent in different areas, because that is something that is introduced by, brought in by the administration because it is the city's budget. Can you just so this committee is fully, has the information that they need, can you just, Diana or yourself, can you just provide a little bit more detail about, I believe it was around like 22 million aside from the recovery funds, what different departments that they went into? I know some went into, youth employment, amongst other things, and water fire. So if you could just provide a little bit more detail about that.
Sure, I'll ask Diana to go into the details of it, but in broad strokes, those additional dollars went to address immediate needs that are out there in the community. So, there were investments in, you mentioned water fire, there's investments to address, the rise in shootings and homicides, and, investments such as in youth jobs, things for this immediate summer. And there was also about $7 million set aside for an economic development support for small businesses, again, to try to get those dollars out there right away to help address the urgency of the moment. But as Diana is showing on her screen, here are the details of how that breaks down.
Thank you, Mayor and Diana. Are there any further questions? I want to be mindful of our time that we have remaining for the agenda items.
Sure, one quick question.
Absolutely, Jim.
So as the council has allocated certain funds and deliberated on that and voted on it, is it, maybe as a clarification, is it safe to presume that we're not going to address the issues that the council has voted and we'll look for alternative sources or alternative activities to fund? So we're not redundant? I mean, I know it's not easy. For example, we can talk about economic development, but public safety is part of economic development. Housing is part of economic development. Childcare is part of economic development. And I'm not advocating either way. I'm just saying if we're going to leave that to the council, let's leave it to the council and move to other areas, or do we overlap to what the council has done? That's my question.
Yeah, my thought is that I don't think the discussion, the deliberations of this group should be limited in any way. So these are initial investments to address some of the urgent needs. But if the committee feels strongly that there's additional supports that we should provide to small businesses, nothing is stopping us from taking that on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, if no more questions or comments, let's move to item number 5 in our agenda, which is the goal setting process discussion. Well, definitely the goal setting will be the key component of this task force. We need to review and we need to work with the consultant to establish what is the right methodology and the most effective one. And in fact, is the item number 1 in our next meeting, orientation and goal setting. So we will be working this afternoon and next week with the consultant in order to try to establish what will be the best methodology. However, we would like to hear from you, any recommendation and any other opinion or comment that you want to have. Angie?
Sure. I think Peter kind of opened the door a little early, and we talked about immediate needs and long-term needs. The things that we're going to be having to address for our city immediately and also long-term. And so, having thoughts from the task force members about what some of the processes of establishing those goals, we welcome those ideas so we can incorporate them as we're moving forward in that. So I'll open the floor for any thoughts that committee members have on this topic area.
Any suggestion, Michael or Jeff, if you want to add something in this point?
Yeah, I can just chime in and say, I think the thought was that these might be both short and medium and long-term goals. So, as you're thinking about suggestions you want to offer, thinking in like 1 and 3 and 5 year timelines might be helpful. So, certainly these funds are available for the next 3 years, but there might be outcomes we'd like to see beyond the duration of the funding eligibility.
Yeah, and what I'll add to Michael's comments is just important for the community to understand. These funds have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, but they can be spent into December 31st, 2026. So there really is that opportunity to really do those long-term items. It's what I will caution is that at the end, if you obligate dollars December 30th, 2024, you want to know that you're going to spend them down without question through 2026, because I don't think, as everybody said, this is such an incredible opportunity for the city. We don't want to risk turning back any dollars. And I think to Diana's, and the mayor's earlier comments about some of the revenue loss pieces is be flexible. We could see some of the short-term investments that have been made by the city council have a really great impact. And we may see an upswing that projects higher, or we may see that we're still lagging. So just be mindful and be flexible of these things that will happen through the next few years as we go through this process.
Okay, any other comment? Please don't forget that for this group will be really, really important, your input, your communication. We need to hear from you. Angie, me as co-chair, we want to lead this group, but your input is key in what we want to do. Okay, we will take this opportunity that everybody's working in different areas, in health, in business, in public work, and all that, all different areas. So we need to take this opportunity to put our thinking on the table. It's totally necessary. So please, the channel of communication will be totally open with us, and we need that you help us with this communication process. Okay. If there is no more comment, yes, Councilwoman, please.
I think, Oscar, I think Julian had his hand raised before me, so I'll go after him.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Just briefly, in request for, especially with the project management support in the process, as we dig into all of this, there's so many moving pieces and things to think through with it. What would be helpful for me would be to have a better sense of how this process for the city overlaps with or aligns with some of the other related funds available at the state level as well. Thinking about housing in particular, it's such a huge issue and a huge need with many different components to it. There's housing funds in the state budget now for the dedicated line items. There's state level. I know there's another process for kind of engagement that the Rhode Island Foundation is helping lead as well. So getting a sense of what are some of the things that are priorities for Providence as well as the state, and what might be covered through other areas. And then the other piece to it is thinking about kind of maybe separating it out into so not just short, medium, and long term, but in terms of one-time kind of transformational investments that don't need to be sustained, but are kind of things that we can use in a flexible way now that really kind of set other things in motion, versus things that once it's created would need to be sustained moving forward, and has a different type of decision making around that in terms of what types of with one-time funds, how to make the most strategic use of them. So just as a request to help us kind of think through how this aligns, or if this happens in this other setting, or who else is making decisions around this, and how we can best connect what we're doing with what else is happening in the bigger picture.
Absolutely, Julian. That complex web of all the resources that are coming into the state is something that we've been really thinking thoughtfully about. And I know Michael and Diana is something that we've chatted about, and I'm sure they've had much more elaborate conversations because, as we all know, that this is a once in a lifetime investment, and we want to make sure that we strategically align with all the other investments and make sure that there's synergy as well too. So I believe our consultant team is going to be looking at that and doing our best to make sure that we're not, building bridges while another one is, building tunnels, so, or maybe we build it together, but that is our hope and aspiration. I'm not sure if Diana or Michael and Jeff want to add anything further to that.
I think that's 100% Angie. What the approach we're going to try to take is be as creative and collaborative. I know this is also in Jeff's wheelhouse. Jeff, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and we've already started those discussions with Sabrina Solar's hand as well, engaging other communities that we're working with, the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, so that we can not only leverage other pots of funding that are coming, but also in cooperative purchases or other ways to reduce costs, because everybody got this money at the same time too. Everybody else has to spend it. There's going to be some supply and demand impacts, and being mindful of those as we go forward. And even looking at those longer term investments, there may be some labor impacts to where we may not have the workforce to be able to do it. And that presents both a challenge, but also a real opportunity with investing these dollars.
I guess.
So what's the question?
Yeah.
Hold a second, Jim. I apologize. We have Woman Lafortune first.
Yep, I'm sorry.
No,
Thank you.
Problem. No problem. And thank you, Julian. You actually, one of my questions was going to be, how do we align with some of the priorities of the state? And also our educational department to make sure that we're not duplicating the work and we're being as effective and as efficient as possible to make investments in the community. Now, just going back to the investment in the communities, one of the things that I think we should also discuss is what type of mechanism we're going to set to engage with, and I know that Michael's group is going to do that, but hopefully that's part of the discussion to get community input, because I think it's really important for us. It's not just our priorities, it's the community's priorities as well, because we are investing in the community. So it's important that we capture their voices. And that's part of our agenda and how we're going to make, and that will inform the recommendations that we provide to invest the money into our city, into our communities. So thank you.
And if I can just respond to that briefly, Councilwoman, I would say that is definitely how we're trying to think about the community engagement process and feeding forward community engagement to the task force in advance of each topic being covered. So as soon as I know the last item on the agenda today is to discuss the order of topics. So as soon as we have settled on that, the goal is to have community engagement in advance of discussing topics so that you have that information to inform your decision making. And as good ideas come forward, really elevating those to the task force for consideration.
Thank you, Michael. Jim?
So again, I'm not trying to belabor the point, but I come to the point where I think I need the most help as we progress on this committee is, how do all the facilities of economic development that intertwine in this fabric of success work? Because it's so broad, I get concerned that, although this is a large pot of money, when you take it out and include things like healthcare and education and housing and all the other things that come before the parochial things that I'm going to focus on, which is economic development for the hospitality industry, that we end up with not enough money in some of these pots to be effective. And especially if we're being redundant with city government. So I think what we're obviously going to be looking for, those of us from the private sector, is guidance from those of you in the public sector, both elected officials and staff, on where you think, the funds may be useful to help the public sector, and I hate to say this, where you don't need help, because nobody's got enough money to say they don't need help. But things are very important that we focus in this short period of time. It seems like a long period of time, but by the time we get this planned and funded and up and running, 2 or 3 years is going to pass very quickly. And so we just want to make sure we're effective on what we're voting for. When I think, again, being parochial, when I think about the hotel industry and the hospitality industry in Providence, there's a couple of key metrics that really help us to succeed in Providence. And by the way, we operate in Providence, we operate in Worcester, and we operate in Boston. And I tell people repeatedly, even when I'm in those other cities, the city to me that has the best advantage in terms of being the perception that it's a safe and walkable city is Providence. And that perception is very important, because people enjoy coming downtown and walking around to the various venues, up College Hill, over to the art centers, wherever it is. So public safety is a critical portion of the success of the hotels in the city. The eclectic venues that we have, whether it's Waterfire or the theater or whatever it is really what makes Providence attractive, along with the restaurants. People come to functions, and whether it's a wedding function or if it's a conference or whatever it is, in the suburbs, but they don't want to stay in the suburbs. They want to stay in Providence, because Providence is a lot better than being in Seekonk. And so we've got to continue to maintain that venue we have. Even in Boston, people talk well of Providence as having great restaurants, great activities, and hearing that it's with I think it's like something like 6 colleges and universities in the area. It's perceived as a safe and walkable city. So how those things intertwine is very important. The second thing in terms of economic development in our area that's very difficult, and you all know what I'm about to say, it's not anything new, but labor has become a huge factor. If I have a staff member that calls out sick, that means sometimes we have to take 10 or 15 rooms out of service. We can't get them serviced. And I know a lot of people like to point the finger, well, they're getting bonuses and they don't want to come to work. That's really not the case. One of the big factors is is child support, supporting the, helping the mother to go to work. And if she comes to work and has to pay for childcare, it's very expensive. So therefore the net becomes, it's better off I stay home and collect unemployment, even though I may want to go to work because the benefits are not the same. So how do we address affordable health care in the city? And then the universal thing, and this happens in a lot of areas. It's not just Providence. People in the hospitality industry, whether it's hotel workers or restaurant workers, have a tough time finding affordable housing for their families. So how far away do they have to live from Providence to be able to afford it? To afford quality, safe housing. So that's a key as well. So those all intertwine. And then the last thing I want to point out is the cities that we operate in that have the most success for economic development. I often say this to mayors, and I know Mayor Alorza has heard this from me. They don't operate on the so-called selling point of cheap, meaning we have cheap labor, cheap taxes, cheap electricity, cheap water, cheap this. What industry is looking for is an educated workforce. And so they'll go to Cambridge, Massachusetts and pay $100 a square foot for rent when the rest of Massachusetts is $25 a square foot because they're buying brain power. And Providence, again, with that nucleus of education and Brown and RISD and all the other great schools in town, has that perception of producing a quality workforce. But we need to assist, the entire education stack to give that impression that Providence and Rhode Island is providing an educated labor force, because that's really where economic development is going to come from. So how we team up with the plans for education is really a key issue to the success of Providence. So that's about it. I'm just concerned, again, to summarize, I'm concerned that we don't go, this committee with its funds doesn't go too broad and not have effective amounts of money in each part that's going to create success.
Thank you, Jim. We are over time. We are 7 minutes over time. I don't know if everybody could keep in the meeting. We should use another 8 minutes, but please, the people who will participate, be short and be specific. Just to say, Jim, yes, what you say is totally right. We need to be the smarter kids in the block to find a fair distribution of the funding in the different buckets. So it's part of the job that we have to do in the best way that we can. We have Larry. Please.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I just wanted to offer a request for a future meeting, if we can understand where there are similar conversations, either in the League of Cities and Towns or amongst just specifically the neighboring cities, to piggyback on Julian's point about understanding where there's synergy between state level conversations and investments and at the city and town level. So that's why.
Thank you. Now we have Sabrina.
I just wanted to, say that I feel like there's a lot of resources that I've received from this meeting alone, just places to go find out more information so that I'm better prepared for the next meeting to bring some real input. But I would like to just add to Jim's point about kind of the hospitality industry. When I'm thinking about Providence hospitality, I would like to think about it through a broader lens than hotels and restaurants. And I know that that's not what Jim was saying specifically, but speaking from the nightlife industry, bars, and also thinking beyond just the downtown segment. So remembering Broad Street and all of the different communities that are within Providence, that the nightlife sector is definitely alive and well here. And so the support that we need does differ than the general hospitality. And I recognize that there's been some faults in the process up until this point in receiving funds and kind of seeking grants in this period as being outside of that window of hospitality. So even when we're seeking resources or having conversations, just want to keep that broader view of what Providence hospitality means. And there's a lot of nightlife, non-traditional and multicultural spaces that I think get left out of some of these conversations in terms of Providence residents being in the city, attending most of their bars, restaurants within this city. So it being not just the tourism piece, but the local nightlife and restaurant and all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. We have 5 minutes. Angie, yeah, I think that we should go to the next item, number 6.
Sure. Agenda item number 6 is to thank you everyone for your comments. It's really thoughtful, and they are sincerely appreciated. Item number 6 is a review of topics in order of presentation. Do we have a slide on that? Or I have the information. I can talk a little bit about it. Is there a specific slide on it? No? Okay. And so from our proposed order of topics from July until about October, our orientation and goal setting, which is our next meeting, we'll be talking about, and then the next meeting we'll be talking about the goals and context. The third meeting we'll be talking about the infrastructure, followed by community justice, followed by housing, homelessness and housing. I know a number of folks cross-sectionally talked about homelessness and housing, followed by public health and food security. The next topic will be workforce development and economic stability. The next one is economic recovery. And then the last between July and October 2022 would be economic development. And as you can see, all of the thoughts and comments pretty much touched upon every single one of those topics that we're going to be covering in coming months. In between January of 2022 and March, will be actually, July and October 2021 is when we're going to be doing the first couple of topics. Between January and March 2022, the topics include community and social justice, sustainability, and then the last one is government. Thank you, Diana. Is that you, Diana, who put the slides up?
Michael, actually.
Michael,
Coming in with
thanks,
the win.
Michael. And this will, this obviously is all public information, and it can be also be shared with the committee members just so they have that in advance as well too.
Just a comment. I'm sorry. And the first part is 2021, July, October 2021.
Yeah. Any thoughts, comments, and anything we missed? So were you going to say something?
Yes, we don't have that slide, and we don't have the slide that
The very first one.
Oscar had when he put up on the first one. Could you make sure that can you send it to my email if possible? Those two, the one that Oscar did and the one that you have up on the screen now.
Sure to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do you need my email?
Yes, I do need your email. I'm sure that team, Diana or maybe Michael.
You know what? I will. I'll email it right to you after the meeting, and then you can send it to me as soon as I send it to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Angie.
No problem.
We have Kristen.
Yes, I would just ask, when we look at economic development, if we could have an emphasis on tourism in the broader sense that Sabrina and Jim both discussed, because I don't know of any other segment of the economy that has been hit as severely as we have. And there really is a lot to talk about in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kristen.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so just two points. I wanted to, I have a comment on this, but first I wanted to just alert everybody to something that I don't know if we've been fully clear on, is that, so we're also coordinating with the school department. Aside from the 160+ million that we received, the school department has also received about 160 million too. And the superintendent is a formal part of this committee. And he and PPSD, they agreed to work with us to coordinate some of those investments in youth learning, education, et cetera. And so, you know, there are potentially additional resources for us to have an input on, and to help make recommendations on how to invest. You know, with the schools side of it, that's a whole different process of how they take the recommendations, but nonetheless, there's an opportunity for us to weigh in. That's one. The second thing is just reflecting back. I really enjoyed and appreciated the conversation up until this point, and you know, reflecting on how intertwined all of these issues are. as the conversations get going, my sense is that, one conversation is going to spill into the next. And while, I have no issue with this schedule here, what I suggest is that, maybe 4 or 5 weeks into this conversation, we reassess and see, does it make sense to have them all as separate buckets, and how are the conversations coming together? So I think it's fine to move forward with what we have now, but in about 4 or 5 weeks, I think it'll make sense for us to just reassess as to whether we follow with the same schedule or tweak it, given the experience of going through these meetings.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one thing that is jumping out at me right now, and I'm not sure if it's going to be interwoven, is behavioral and mental health. Is there any thoughts about how that's going to be a standalone topic or interwoven with any of the topics that are there now?
MGM, I'll take that quickly. So in reviewing this list, I think there's 2 components in which we can talk about behavioral health and the need for support there. I think we can have that conversation both in the community justice space. I was hoping that some members of the city's administration could come and do presentations on the work that is currently happening in that space around community justice. We could also have our Healthy Communities Director come and speak on public health and the work that they are doing with regard to behavioral health as well, as part of the public health and food security discussion. So I think there's multiple opportunities for us to have that discussion within this category of topics.
Thank you, Diana.
Angie, may I just say, and Diana, I do think behavioral and mental health should be its own category, because that is one of the topic areas that we've seen have come to light, especially due to the impact of the pandemic. And for years, we've, as a community, as a nation, we have not made real investment in that particular area. So I do see the benefit of aligning it or making it a part of one of these other priority areas, but I do think it should be a standalone particular area, because it does need investment, and we're seeing the effects of not investing in behavioral and mental health, and how it impacts our youth, how it impacts adults, how it impacts marginalized communities.
Thank you, Councilman LaFortune. Anything else from everyone? Julian, you're going to say something?
Just briefly, speaking from the perspective of environmental justice and climate change, I don't necessarily think it needs to be its own separate category on here, because it is so intertwined with so many of the other topic areas. I could see it being in infrastructure for sure. Housing is an environmental justice issue. Workforce and economic stability is a huge part of that. Public health and food security. So it's connected throughout. But I just wanted to make sure that it gets kind of attention and framing, and especially in the context of just living through an intense crisis for the past year or two, that we don't kind of think in this framework of recovery as if the crisis has passed, but in the perspective that there's ongoing crises. Housing is a crisis, policing is a crisis, there are ongoing crises, and with climate change, we know that all of those existing crises will just continue to get amplified and intersect with each other. And so climate change really needs to be part of that thinking towards and anticipating future crises, shocks, disasters, migrations, et cetera, that are associated with what we can expect over the next 20, 30, 40 years, and being really intentional and smart about what have we learned from the crisis we've been through, and then connecting kind of crisis back to what you were just saying about mental health and behavioral health, that we don't individualize this as just people needing treatment and services, but really thinking about trauma and crisis and collective healing of what can we learn from what we've been through to better deal with the underlying traumas that kind of come out in all of these different ways across every single piece. So maybe as part of that goals context setting piece at the beginning.
Yeah, just to let you know, we are considering including in the topic about infrastructure, we will include public works, climate mitigation, and adaptation. So yeah, it's considering one of the topic.
Thank you.
Well, okay. It's 1:21. Any final comments before close the meeting? Nope.
Only final comment I have is I want to thank everyone, the steering committee members who have stepped up to serve our residents in Providence with your expertise. Thank you for Mayor Lorza, Councilwoman LaFortune for, and the city staff members for, allowing us this opportunity to be able to serve our community in this way.
Yeah, and from my side, thank you, everybody. And please let's keep in communication. Feel free to contact Angie or me. Let's do our best to make things good things happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second motion.
Second.
So move. Oh.
Second that, please. Peter Asen?
Peter, was that you?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.